asked me to enter a plea of guilty on his behalf.
4 to life, 2 to life.
You got to tell me whether or not I should try to get you a misdemeanor.
Now saying that you're not guilty?
Crack epidemic is like nothing we've ever seen.
CCP.
Cocaine.
We have junkies coming out.
Heroin.
Cocaine.
Selling drugs is illegal.
Punish you by removing you from
money,
society.
Guns, bulletproof vests, police scanners.
I'm the only white guy that was arrested that night.
A paid snitch comes into court and lies in front of the public.
Judicial gridlock.
The system is jammed.
These numbers are staggering.
I have enough work without this case.
That's 1,000 people waiting to see a judge.
Shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
And see that justice is done.
Let me ask you a question. Somebody offers you a couple of hundred, maybe even $300 or $400 to carry a package from, say, New York to Philadelphia. Nobody has to tell you. You know it's drugs. Do you do it? A couple of $100 on the one hand, a couple of years hard time minimum if you're caught. Who do you think is tempted by deals like that?
Excuse me, sir. May I speak to you, please? I'm Sergeant Canelli with the Port Authority Police. I'd like to ask a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind.
Detective Sergeant Richard Canelli is a foot soldier in the war on drugs. His battlefield, the Port Authority bus terminal on Manhattan's west side. His quarry, the mules, the drug couriers, who risk arrest and imprisonment for a few $100s. To the drug cartels, they are disposable, easily replaced. Usually black or Hispanic, most are poor.
Whose black and white travel bag is this?
Police concede that these kinds of operations have a negligible impact on the overall flow of drugs into our cities, but the politicians are pleased.
They are interested in making a lot of arrests. It looks good for the media. It looks good for the press. It looks good for the president's war on drugs. It looks good in general.
But it has also created an almost intolerable burden on our legal system, our police, courts, and prisons. In New York City alone, there are more than 100,000 drug-related misdemeanor and felony arrests every year. Public opinion polls insist that's what we want.
So you're not transporting any narcotics?
No, this is the only bag right here.
And you'd allow me to search that bag if I asked you?
Search it if you want.
Excuse me, sir, may I speak to you, Mom, please? I'm Sergeant Canelli with the Port Authority Police.
Sergeant Canelli, like most undercover police, is in a bind. On the one hand, political pressure to make as many busts as possible. On the other, blinking like a warning light over each suspect's shoulder, the protection of the U.S. Constitution.
You have an absolute right to say, you cannot talk to me, you cannot look in my bag, you cannot hold me here any longer than I want, you must let me go, and I don't want you to talk to me or bother me.
You're not carrying any narcotics, are you? You don't believe so?
Sergeant Canelli, for example, cannot simply operate on the basis of his instincts. Under the law, for a case to stand up in court, he needs either sufficient cause or the permission of the person he's questioning to press on, to search a bag. It is tantalizing, time-consuming, and frustrating.
Well, do you want to surrender this bag?
Sergeant Canelli is convinced this woman is a courier and has drugs in her travel bag.
All right, allow me to search it then? Well, you gave it to me. Do you want me to search it or not?
Well, can I go?
It becomes an exercise in seduction. Canelli could open the bag without permission, but then the evidence, whatever is found, would only be suppressed in court later on.
All right, tell you what. Why don't you just surrender the bag? I'll call the DA. There's an ECAP DA telling you surrendering the bag to me at this point. And we'll see what he says. You know
Canelli is disarming, engagingly polite. But if she lets him look in the bag and drugs are found, she could go to state prison for several years. Sergeant Canelli neglects to mention that.
Well, I understand that.
Even so, the woman does not give her consent. Canelli is stuck.
All right, you're free to leave.
She disappears, abandoning the bag. Now, Canelli is free to inspect.
About a half a pound of coke and a pound of marijuana, huh?
It's going to make his job extremely difficult if people who are in fact carrying drugs with them know enough to say, Detective Sergeant, get out of my face, I don't want to talk.
Well, there's something a little scary about that. Knowledge of one's rights, knowledge of your constitutional right to be free from walking without being stopped. If knowledge means the drug war is going to be lost, then that's a scary thought.
Excuse me, sir, may I speak to you a second, please? I'm Sergeant Kennelly with the Port Authority Police. I'd like to ask you a couple of quick questions, please, if you don't mind. We can talk right here. You don't have to answer my questions if you don't want to either.
He really wanted to look in my bag, so I didn't have no choice.
Willie Camacho, 20 years old, unemployed, father of 2 small children, did have a choice, but he didn't understand that.
Would you mind if I looked at that bag further?
Go ahead.
Thank you. This marijuana yours?
That's his.
Oh, that's his?
Yeah,
that's his marijuana. No. All right, stand up, put your hands behind your back. No, no problem with you. No. Is that your marijuana in the bag or his marijuana?
He told me to carry it.
Okay, no es un problema. Es monkey.
Yeah. All right, step off the bus. Not exactly busted a month club.
Whether the marijuana belongs to Camacho quickly becomes irrelevant. A routine body search discovers 2 ounces of heroin concealed in his underwear. The heroin street value, about $16,000. Willie Camacho is now facing a Class A felony charge. Possible sentence, if convicted, of 15 years to life.
All I want to tell you is I can't promise you anything, all right, and I'm not going to promise you anything. And the district attorney cannot promise you anything and will not promise you anything.
Don't worry, Mom. Okay, don't worry. And now what will happen to me? I was thinking about my kids, you know. Me going to jail, I was afraid because my first time getting arrested. I didn't know what was going to happen next.
Willie Camacho has entered a legal twilight zone between arrest and arraignment. He is out of contact with family and friends. For 24 hours, he doesn't even have access to a lawyer.
During that 24-hour period, a person is dehumanized. You get shifted sometimes in Manhattan from precinct to precinct, depending upon where they can hold you.
Camacho ends up the night in a subterranean holding pen.
They're now in what is a dungeon underneath the courthouse. I don't know if the air ever changes in that building down below. You have people struggling from overdose of drugs. They're detoxifying. You got people who are coming down off some very bad drunks.
This is what you meet when you go visit your client for the first time, because judges refer to them as numbers, corrections people refer to them as bodies, and he's a person underneath there.
It's a difficult concept to keep in mind. There are just too many people being jammed through a system that was overburdened even before the war on drugs began.
What's the address, Camacho? As someone goes through a system and gets treated like cattle, and then eventually ends up right in front of me. Hello, I know you don't know me, I know you've been in jail for 36 hours, but I'm your lawyer. Your job is to restore some of his confidence, restore some of his humanity, and then get in front of the judge and make the judge care about him. And the judge, in the meantime, is arraigning 70 to 80 cases a day.
Docket 90N044565, William Camacho, step up.
I spoke with Mr. Camacho's wife. They may be able to make $1,000 bail.
Bail is set in the amount of $20,000.
Judge, could I-
Bond, $10,000 cash.
There's no way I'm going to get out now, you know. Nobody in my family could come up with that money.
Willie Camacho has just been tipped into the wide mouth of a huge funnel, the New York criminal justice system.
The Koppel Report. Drugs, crime, and doing time. Brought to you by Alcoa, reminding you to recycle your aluminum beverage and food cans. And AT&T, the right choice.
I'm minding my own business, and this guy on the phone starts chewing my ear off about how I
can... State your name, shield number, and command.
Richard Michael Canale, shield number 17, Port Authority Detective Squad, Port Authority Bus Terminal.
Cut and dried, right? We saw it happen. Willie Camacho was arrested and found to be carrying 2 ounces of heroin. His avenue of least risk? Plead guilty. First-time offender, 1 to 3 years in prison. But even the war on drugs has to be fought within the guidelines of the U.S. Constitution. The defense lawyer will argue that Sergeant Canale restrained Camacho by approaching and questioning him without due cause, a violation of Fourth Amendment rights. That is what this pretrial hearing is about.
Once we begin this hearing, I will not get involved in any plea bargaining whatsoever.
And that's the gamble. No 1 to 3 year plea bargain. If Camacho loses here, he could spend the next 25 years in prison.
Where were you at approximately 5:10 p.m. on May 15th of this year?
I was at the lower level of the Greyhound area, which is called the north wing of the Port Authority bus terminal.
I think the question has to be is, what did William Camacho do prior to his getting arrested, which would have drawn suspicion?
I observed an individual later known to me as Mr. Camacho, and Mr. Camacho was pacing in the area.
I saw him.
Remember, Canale's instincts, no matter how good, are not enough. He needs sufficient cause to stop a suspect.
What do I have to do to arouse your suspicion?
There's a lot of things. Yawning, scratching the back of the neck. Your body language would tell me.
Because I scratched the back of my neck? Because I looked around a couple of times?
Because of the way you were acting.
What was I doing?
And you walked out of line a couple times?
No, I didn't walk out of line no time.
Okay, he's going to say that you did, so don't worry about that.
For approximately how long did you make these observations?
About approximately 5 or 6 minutes.
And at that point, you made a decision to go onto the bus and question him about the contents of his bag. Isn't that right?
At least attempt to question him, sir, yes.
Please, I'm Sergeant Canale with the Port Authority Police. I'd like to ask a couple of quick questions, please, if you don't mind.
It's very easy for people in America to sit and say, he was guilty anyway. It doesn't matter. But it does matter, because if you don't start drawing the line where the Constitution exists, the country's going to be in tremendous trouble.
Pat Joyce has touched on the essence of the conflict that confronts us all. Even if the war on drugs were successful, and that is far from clear, does it warrant suspending our constitutional safeguards?
The totality of these factors clearly indicates a lack of voluntary consent. Accordingly, the motion is granted and the evidence is suppressed from the bag and the person of the defendant as well. This constitutes the order and decision of this court.
In Willie Camacho's case, the Constitution kept him out of jail.
It's disappointing, disheartening, and frustrating. You don't want to throw everybody up against the wall and search their bags. That would help the drug problem, but it wouldn't be great for our civil rights. On the other hand, I think if you are too cautious about the civil rights or go too far with it, then we have a worse drug problem.
Camacho was lucky, but the sentencing requirements in New York State, among the toughest in the country, leave the courts very little discretion. A small-time drug courier can face the same stiff prison term as a big dealer.
42, 62, and 63, Josephine Cuevas from the pen.
You see these low-level cases and they just trickle in, and you don't really think that they're having any effect.
He may sound like a defense attorney, but Chris Marzuk is the prosecutor in the case of Josephine Cuevas.
Ready to go? Okay. Yes, Judge.
Take Josephine Cuevas. She has 5 cases. What does that mean? That means, okay, I went into the grand jury 5 times. I used typing services 5 times. I had 5 stenographers. There were 5 chemists. There were at least 5 police officers, maybe as many as 8 or 9 that had to come down here for a day to indict this case. Everything about this case is multiplied times 5.
And what was the drug or the controlled substance?
27 bottles of crime.
Josephine Cuevas is not connected to Noriega. She's not the drug dealer of the century. You're never going to find her carrying kilos or transporting huge quantities or even in possession of huge quantities of money. That's not going to happen. She's a low-level street person. But the low-level street people are the ones that make the system the way it is now. And the system is jammed.
Faced with a 130% increase in narcotics arrests since 1985, the emphasis has to be on moving the largest number of defendants through the system in the shortest period of time. Technically, everyone still has the right to a trial by jury, but there aren't enough courtrooms or judges. There isn't enough money or time. The name of the game now is cop a plea. Make a deal.
If you go to trial and lose, the best you're going to do is 4.5 to 9. The best you're going to do on a plea after indictment is 2 to 4. You got to tell me whether or not I should try to get you a misdemeanor.
We measure progress in the war on drugs by the numbers we arrest, convict, and imprison. The emphasis is on body count. Indeed, by that standard, the war is a huge success. Here in New York City last year, there were 50,000 felony drug defendants. If each of them insisted on a trial by jury, the cost, conservatively, would be about $6 billion. The state had to find a safety valve. It created this special court, Part N. The N stands for narcotics. It's a judicial fast food franchise where defendants get a quick, cut-rate deal on justice, on the condition that they waive their right to a trial by jury.
By pleading guilty now, you give up those rights.
Yes, Your Honor.
Does Part N work?
For what function?
Does it work? Is it just?
Does it work? Maybe. Is it just? No.
What's the difference?
Working means people coming into the system, getting out of the system. That's not the same thing as just.
How does your client plead on the 4 cases?
My client has authorized me to enter a plea of guilty on his behalf.
To plea of guilty.
Plea of guilty.
Plea of guilty.
Plea of guilty on her behalf.
These are almost all people without money. They have had very little time to consult with a lawyer. If they insist on a trial with a jury, they'll get it. But unable to make bail, they'll wait 6 to 12 months for that trial. And they'll wait in jail.
Okay, you know what? You're innocent. Stay in jail for 9 months till you go to trial. If you're guilty, plead guilty. Say you had the drugs. Say you sold the drugs. You go home right now. You're on probation. You won't do a day in jail.
You're my lawyer. You tell me.
I can't tell you. I don't do the time. You do the time. I will tell you that what your chances are winning. If I think you can win, then I'll tell you what to do. I'll say, do you think you can spend a few months in jail without getting killed? Do you think you can do it without killing yourself? And we'll discuss it. But we'll discuss it in 15 minutes or an hour in front of 20 other defendants.
You understand this?
Is that clear?
Yes, Your Honor.
They don't have a clue what's going on. And a defendant has to sit there and say, yes, 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 I know I'm giving up these rights. No one's forcing me. Plead guilty, go home. Plead not guilty, stay in jail. I mean, if that isn't forcing somebody, then I don't really know what is.
You have a right to have this case presented to the grand jury.
Does it trouble you that the people who are coming through there are almost all black and Hispanic? Don't you?
Of course it troubles me. It troubles me that most of the people that I see are poor people who have had no chance, who had no education, who have no job skills, many of whom are addicted to drugs and really out there selling because of their addiction. I mean, I would be a dead person if they didn't trouble me.
Have you had enough time to speak with your attorney, Mr. Gordon, and do you fully understand what you're doing by pleading guilty?
Yes, I do.
And
Elizabeth Burgos is charged with twice selling $40 bags of heroin. She has been offered a plea bargain. It is the best deal she will get. 18 months in a state prison.
And are you pleading guilty because you are actually guilty of the charge? What is your answer? Do you state that you are pleading guilty because you are actually guilty of the charge?
No, I'm not guilty of the charge.
All right. Mr. Gordon, I will not accept this plea.
All right.
And we will proceed with grand jury action in this case.
Elizabeth Burgos wants to be placed in a drug treatment center, but that option is not open under New York law because she is a previously convicted felon.
My lawyer told me that there was no chance of me getting into a drug program. You know, you've been accused already of the same charges once before, but he didn't take time to really find out what's true or listen to me. You know, it's like I'm not even there.
And she's saying, why can't I get a drug program? And you explain to her because the law does not permit it. And that's incredibly frustrating too, because what she really needs more than anything else is a drug program.
The plea bargain of 18 months is no longer on the table. Elizabeth Burgos goes back to jail for 90 days until it is time for another hearing, at which time she will get another offer from the district attorney. Only now, the price of the plea bargain will be 3 years.
What will happen to Elizabeth Burgos if she goes to prison, most likely, is she will do her time, and she'll come out and she'll have felony convictions, she'll have relatively little education, and almost no job prospects whatsoever. And what we usually see from people coming out is that they have nowhere to go, no way of supporting themselves, and they'll go back into the same neighborhoods and frequently slide back into addiction.
You're offering an E felony?
The crack epidemic is like nothing we've ever seen before. So the system is just being overrun by drug cases. And frankly, I'm very pessimistic because I don't see any end in sight. I think that things may get worse before they actually get better.
Part N is the inevitable result of a legal system that is just overloaded. Defense attorneys don't get to defend, prosecutors don't get to prosecute. Judges are largely reduced to processing cases, 70, 80, 100 of them a day. And the defendants who accept those plea bargains are forever marked as felons, with almost no chance to enter public drug rehabilitation programs, only a few of which exist to begin with. The trial by jury for people accused of drug-related felonies is on the verge of becoming an unaffordable luxury. We'll show you why when we come back.
Hi, Charlie Rocco. Charlie, we have a trial inmate who was not produced, and we're ready to go here, and everybody's waiting for this defendant. Desmond Legister.
Desmond Legister, 24 years old, is charged with 3 counts of selling cocaine, all felonies. Determined to have a trial by jury but unable to make bail, Legister has been in jail since June of 1989.
Ultimately, we only have the following choices. He pleads guilty or he goes to trial.
In the years since his arrest, Legister has made 19 court appearances and turned down 4 separate plea offers. He will get his trial by jury, but if he's convicted, he faces a possible sentence of 25 years to life.
Desmond Legister is a small fry. He's not a major importer. He's not a major trafficker.
Legister can't afford to hire an attorney. He's being represented by Dan Arshak from the Legal Aid Society.
I always wonder, who's worse? The person that brings in the 500 kilos or the person who breaks it down and makes sure it's sold on the streets?
For Arshak's adversary, Assistant District Attorney Eric Hirschman, the Legister case is only one of 40 narcotics cases that he's working on at any given time.
What we have is 2 videotapes and 4 audio tapes that I have to go over with you.
Those video and audio tapes, some of the main evidence in Hirschman's case against Legister, were recorded over a 5-week surveillance operation, which cost the city of New York almost $25,000. Even so, not all of this evidence will make it into Legister's trial.
I understand you have consented to resolve the very minor audibility problems that remain with the tapes.
Defense attorney Arshak claims that not all portions of the tape can be understood. Anything that gets thrown out will be a victory for the defense.
If we could just play the portions of the tape that are in question.
All right, you think I better come closer to the machine, Mr. Hirschman?
I think we'll all have to.
Judge Leslie Crocker Snyder, on the bench for 7 years, specializes in felony narcotics trials. The Legister trial is only one of the 250 cases she has on her calendar.
Oh, no, I heard that clearly. I don't want to have shit with me outside my crack house. Okay. So I would deem all of that to be audible. Good morning, prospective jurors, and welcome to Part 72 of Manhattan Supreme Court.
Under New York law, we can't show jurors' faces in the courtroom. The drug crisis has touched so many people that selecting an impartial jury has become painfully difficult.
You cannot hold anything you might know or feel about problems involving narcotics in this city against this defendant. Every
It
defendant
takes
is
a full
presumed to be
day to
innocent,
pick
and
a
our
jury
system of
for the
justice, as I
Legister
will be
trial.
discussing with
Judge
you
Snyder
fully
calls for
later this morning.
100 or more potential jurors in a narcotics trial because almost half will say they cannot serve.
One after one, they will tell me things like, I can't serve in this case because my son is in jail for selling drugs. I can't serve in this case because my daughter is in drug rehabilitation. I can't serve in this case because my nephew overdosed from drugs.
An actual trial in a felony narcotics case is becoming something of a rarity in New York City. Only 3% of these cases ever get to trial. You're about to see some of the reasons why. On the first day of the Legister trial, one of the jurors is in a car accident. The day is a total loss. Delays are caused for one reason or another on every subsequent day.
Is your witness here?
No, he isn't. There. I don't know if he went in the back entrance or not. I mean,
Well,
Peter's
it's
trying to
now
call.
2:45. The jury's here, you're here, Mr. Arshak's here, I'm here. Everyone has been able to get here. I don't know why you can't then have somebody babysit your witness if it's necessary.
It may be necessary.
The number of delays in this case.
Is your life filled with a lot of that as you sit on the bench where you want to push this thing through, and yet it doesn't work? Lawyers don't show up, witnesses don't show up, jurors don't show up.
Of course, problems come up. I think one of the problems that came up that was most typical in this case was the Department of Correction not producing Desmond Legister from jail in a timely fashion on any number of occasions. Captain. Yes, well, we've spoken, unfortunately, all too often before. I've been sitting here for 1 hour waiting for a defendant who is exactly across the street. His name is Desmond Legister. We're on trial. Now, I don't understand why someone who's literally half a block away from my courtroom can't be brought here on time. I'm ready to go over there and pull him out myself. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize to you for keeping you waiting.
In between the many delays, the trial does proceed.
At this time, the people call Lieutenant Scott Janley.
Shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
The prosecution calls 8 witnesses, all police officers who took part in the operation that led to Legister's arrest.
Detective, by whom are you employed?
New York City Police Department.
How long have you been employed by the police department?
Approximately 4.5 years.
What's your educational background?
Each of the 8 witnesses is called to put the details of the undercover operation on the record.
What was your job?
I was assigned as a backup officer for
For the
undercover.
jury, it means listening to days of testimony. For the officers, it means spending an average of 6 days just waiting to testify.
Call your next witness, please.
This time, the people call Police Officer Peter Kerry.
Officer Kerry.
Ultimately, though, there was only one actual witness to Legister's alleged sales. He's an undercover cop known on the street as David, and using the assumed name of Peter Kerry in the courtroom. For his protection, we agreed not to reveal his identity.
Now, officer, were you wearing any type of recording device on June 12th of 1989?
Yes, I was.
In fact, he wore a wire on at least 5 separate occasions during the operation. It took approximately 3 days for the jury to listen to and hear testimony about those audio tapes. Tapes full of static and jargon.
This shit is right. Officer, when you say product, what do you mean?
Cocaine.
What do you mean by beat? What do you mean rock? What do you mean?
Crack.
And what does he mean by right? What do you mean rough? And the word disappointed, what did you mean by disappointed? What did you take that to mean?
Well, it's sort of self-explanatory.
Well, is it?
I'd say that myself.
Okay, then I'll go forward.
Hirschman questions the undercover for 2 days. Then it's Arshak's turn to cross-examine. As in most narcotics trials, this case boils down to the police officer's word against that of the defendant. Arshak's responsibility is to his client. His best hope is to undermine the credibility of this key witness.
As an undercover officer, you deceive people. Correct?
Well, you play a role, don't you?
Yes, I do.
You play a role.
Yes, I do.
You make things up.
Absolutely.
You say things that aren't true. Right? You lie. Right?
Is it not reasonable to suggest that such a man, in order to survive, has got to be able to confuse people, has got to be able to lie as part of his job?
And his job is off the stand
and his job is on the stand. He's on his job in both places. And I believe...
That's true, but...
Understand something. I absolutely believe that that police officer came into court and lied. I absolutely believe that. All right? And how am I going to show that to the jury? And that's what you do on a regular basis. You say things that aren't true to people on the street as part of your job, correct?
No, I'll allow that. You're posing as a drug dealer, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And is that true?
Yes, it is.
There you go.
Mr. Legislator, do solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give this
At the
court
heart
injury-
of Arshak's defense against two of the charges facing Legister is the contention that Desmond didn't sell drugs but acted only as a middleman between the undercover cop who bought the drugs and Legister's acquaintances who sold them.
It's not a crime in New York to buy drugs. And consequently, because it's not a crime in New York to buy drugs, someone who is simply helping somebody buy drugs hasn't committed a crime.
It's no crime, that is, unless Legister received a payment from the people who sold the drugs to David, the undercover cop.
When you went there, did you receive any money or any drugs as a result of bringing David there?
Not from the people who's selling.
Did you receive anything from David?
When I took him there, he gave me some drugs and said, "That's for you."
And it's your testimony that you did David this favor so you can get this little pinch of cocaine, right? You said about the size of a quarter. Remember that yesterday?
Yes.
And it's your story that David got up here and you saw David testify. David lied, right?
Objection.
Sustain.
You're the convicted felon, right?
Objection.
Sustain.
I have nothing further.
It is the jury, of course, which will ultimately render judgment on the question of Desmond Legister's guilt. Some of the most dramatic moments of this 10-day trial, however, which you will see when we come back, were never seen or heard or referred to while the jury was in the courtroom.
Your Honor, why did we even bother going into that sort of acrimony?
It's because it's something we're going to have to address.
I'm not accusing you of anything. You don't have to accuse me of anything.
No, Mr. Arshak.
Informant to introduce one of their undercover officers to Desmond Legister. The informant allegedly witnessed Legister's first drug sale. That should support the prosecution's case. But until this moment, Prosecutor Hirschman has claimed that the confidential informant couldn't be found.
When he said he couldn't find them, I thought that it was important and incumbent on me for me to try to find him. I did find him. I spoke to him. At that time, he told me in front of witnesses that he was ready, willing, and able to testify for the defendant.
Sir, my name is Eric Hirschman. I'm an assistant district attorney.
The prosecutor releases a bombshell. He has videotaped the confidential informant who claims that defense lawyer Arshak threatened him, pressuring him to testify that he, not Legister, sold drugs to the undercover cop. Arshak categorically denies the charge.
I do know that he completely turned his testimony around and told the DA a completely different story than what he told me.
The next day, outside the presence of the jury, but on the record, the tape is played in court.
He sort of convinced me to lie, which he had me scared. In other words, I felt that, well, if I don't testify on his behalf, that something's going to happen to me.
Something happened to your safety, you mean?
It happened to my safety, yes. Jeopardizing my life.
How much money did he give you?
$40, two $20 bills.
It's an incautious thing to do, wasn't it? I mean, you're an experienced attorney.
He says to me, I'm supposed to have my kids this weekend, and I need a few dollars so I can take care of them this weekend. Can you loan me that money? Is it incautious? Yes, it's incautious. But I took a calculated risk. It almost worked. And I think that my client, and that's who I care about, would have wanted me to do nothing less. Your Honor, I have no question about my conduct, and I submit you should have no question about my conduct.
Well, at this point, I do, in all honesty.
Well, I don't think you should.
have a determination about it, but I have a question about it.
Out of the mouth of a paid snitch, Judge. That's what you're questioning my conduct on.
No, I already said that I take the word of a confidential informant with some degree of suspicion.
I hope you would.
But defense attorneys have very difficult jobs to do. They have to walk a thin line at times in order to protect their clients' rights. And at times you may feel that they have crossed that line, and they may feel they haven't. And that may be a very difficult issue.
A mistrial is narrowly avoided. Still, the delay has cost time and money. More importantly, Arshak fears that a sense of order and civility has been lost, and that this may hurt his client.
All right, good morning, everybody. Let's try to get started. Everybody is present except the jury. Yes, you wanted to raise some issues.
Your Honor, as a result of the prosecutor's summation yesterday, I have two...
The trial is about to go to the jury. All the evidence has been presented. Dan Arshak still hasn't given up.
You recall that the defendant's testimony in this case was that undercover officer Carey gave him a pinch of cocaine as a tip.
A small amount was missing from the cocaine in evidence, but the prosecutor argues that some of the drugs were used up in the testing process at the police lab.
The prosecutor knows that's false. Your Honor knows that's false. I knows that.
Excuse me, Mr. Arshak. Don't tell me what I know is false.
Well,
first of all, coming from you after your conduct in this trial, I find this absolutely amazing. Number two, I not only don't know it to be false, I know it to be true.
Your Honor, it is false.
It is not false, and you're shouting that it's false doesn't make it so.
No, but Sergeant Schmidt, who runs the police chemistry lab, knows that it's the policy to weigh the drugs when they come in.
Are you going to testify now? Are you going to testify?
No, I'm making an application.
Or did you tell him to change his testimony, too?
Your Honor, why did we even bother going into that sort of acrimony?
It's because it's something
I'm not
we're going to
accusing
have
you
to
of
address.
anything. You don't have to accuse me of anything.
No,
I'm an officer of the court. I stand here as an officer of the court.
Arshak,
I took an oath to tell the truth when I became an officer of the court, and I've told the truth on every occasion in this case.
Well,
the fact that a paid snitch comes into court and lies in front of the prosecutor, and you take that to be the truth, appalls me.
Now, you can yell and scream all you want.
No, I can't.
Well, methinks perhaps you do protest too much.
It's frustrating that I wasn't able to do better by Desmond. I felt as though I was battling two prosecutors in there. One sat in a black robe, and the other one sat in the table next to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes.
Will the defendant, Mr. Legislator, please stand? I'll say you as to the first count under indictment number 7183 of 1989.
It took them less than an hour here to come with a verdict.
Charging the defendant, Desmond Legislator, with the crime of criminal sale of a controlled substance in the first degree. Guilty or not guilty?
We find the defendant guilty.
Did you think they were going to find you not guilty?
No.
Juror number 1, is that your verdict?
That is my verdict.
Juror number 2, is that your verdict?
That is mine.
Juror number 3, is that your verdict?
That is my verdict.
I won't find a better deal with anybody else.
Yeah.
Kitty Dukakis, painfully honest with Barbara Walters.
What substances did you ingest?
I drank nail polish remover and hairspray.
Watch a 2020 exclusive Friday.
One month after the verdict, Desmond Legislator is back in court to receive his sentence.
I'm not ready, man.
I understand that you're not ready, but she's going to go forward. I'm going to take a minute and look at this.
Mr. Hirschman, do you now wish to be heard prior to sentence?
Yes, Your Honor. By the defendant's own admission, when he was on the witness stand, he's been involved in the narcotics business and selling drugs for 7 years. And the people's position is that he should be removed from society for as long as possible.
I think he sent a message to everyone. Remember that guy? Well, there was no rehabilitating him. But you see what happened to him? If you're going to be involved with this could possibly happen to you.
You think the people of the state of New York got their money's worth in this case?
I guess the question is, did they spend their money well? And I think the answer to that is a resounding no.
Our legislature, as you know, has seen fit to permit sentences for people who sell 100 pounds of cocaine or any controlled substance to serve the same amount of time as someone who sells 2 ounces. I know that Your Honor wants to be able to address the drug problem in our society in the position that you're in as,
But I
as a
don't
judge.
intend to. I don't intend to correct that problem,
Well,
nor do I have the power to by sentencing your defendant.
I'm asking Your Honor, please. I'm 24 years old right now, and I'd like to at least come back out on the street before I reach the age of 50.
Do you think, Desmond, that you can do 20, 25 years of hard time and come out and be a productive citizen?
If I have to do the whole 25 before I hit the street again, I don't think I'm gonna wanna do nothing productive when I come out the street. And I would appreciate it, Your Honor, if you could have a little leniency and not giving me the maximum sentence to this case, Your Honor. Please.
Thank you. I believe that selling drugs is just as serious, if not more so, in a different way than the crime of murder, and that the penalties in most cases are appropriate. In a murder case, you have a body, and that's a tangible horror, but when you sell drugs, you're really nothing more than a purveyor of death. I don't delude myself, incidentally, and I want to make it clear, into thinking that any sentence I impose upon you will rehabilitate you, because our system doesn't rehabilitate anybody. It hasn't attempted to do so, even though it should, in my view. The only thing I can hope to accomplish by my sentence is to punish you, Mr.
In the end, Legister is sentenced to spend the next 20 years in state prison, no parole. It has already cost the state of New York almost $150,000 to arrest, prosecute, and try him. Now the state will spend over $1 million to house and guard Desmond Legister till the year 2010.
Was he born drug addicted?
Yes, he was.
Cocaine?
Yes.
The father has been served. He's incarcerated. A permanent neglect by the respondent mother.
Baby born drug addicted. Is the child medically ready for discharge?
No. Cigarette burns and abuse.
The respondent mother has permanently neglected these two children.
Literally across the street from Judge Crocker Snyder's courtroom is another one. It may be the most depressing courtroom in the city. Again, it is the fallout from drugs that is clogging the court's calendar. But what Judge Judith Scheinland sees from the bench in family court is the disintegration of our future.
What goes on in the city really is almost like an illness. Families falling apart. Families falling apart in large part because of drugs. In 1984, there were approximately 5,000, a little more than 5,000 cases filed involving children who were abused or neglected. In 1989, that figure is over 24,000 cases. That gives you some idea of the staggering impact that crack has had on families and children and on the courts.
Ma'am, raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth.
This is a petition by the Commissioner of Social Services to extend the placement of two children who are in care. Are you in a drug program?
No.
Why not?
I was.
So what happened?
I got out of it.
Why?
Started using drugs again.
I prognosticate, and it's a terrible prognostication, that unless we find some real answers within the next decade, we're going to be spending a substantial amount of practically 3/4 of our tax dollars on taking care of dysfunctional families and people in drug treatment, foster care, juvenile justice, criminal justice system, penal system, building more jails, building more courthouses, funding more judges, funding more support staff for those judges.
PCP.
Cocaine.
20 bags.
Crack.
Cocaine. We have to come up with something new to discourage people from using drugs.
We can't even console ourselves with the thought that most of the officials in the system think it's working very well. The police know that most of the people they're arresting, the drug couriers, the dealers on the street, are almost instantly replaced.
The prosecutors and judges know that our prisons rarely, if ever, rehabilitate a narcotics offender. The defense lawyers are reduced to negotiating the best deals or plea bargains they can manage. The law is a luxury that most of their defendants either cannot afford or dare not risk. Like all wars, the war on drugs is producing some unintended casualties. In New York and many other beleaguered cities around this country, the legal system is one of them. I'm Ted Koppel in New York. Good night.
I'm using this other long-distance company. Try to call Phoenix, I misdial Fiji. I call the operator. She says she can't give me instant credit. I say AT&T always did. She says, you're not dealing with AT&T.
If you miss dealing with AT&T, it's easier than ever to come back.
Some say it is a war against disadvantaged young people instead. Channel 7 News Tonight is next.
Hi, I'm Rick Dees, and listen in the Middle East.
Also Larry King, Susan Lucci, and Hollywood gears up for music video's top awards on Good Morning America tomorrow.
The Koppel Report. Drugs, crime, and doing time has been brought to you by AT&T, the right choice. And Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately? For a printed transcript of this program, send $5 to The Koppel Report. Drugs, crime, and doing time. Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. To order by credit card, call 212-227-READ. Rush and fax service are available. VHS video cassettes of The Koppel Report are available from Journal Graphics. The price is $29.95 plus $3.95 handling. Call toll-free 1-800-TALK-SHO. The Koppel Report is a presentation of Koppel Communications in cooperation with ABC News.
America's watching ABC.